Hey, how's it going, everybody? Can everybody hear me okay? Can you just confirm? Hey, guys, anybody watching, can you guys confirm if you can hear me? Okay, I'm just going to give it maybe a minute or two for people to start tuning in. Okay. So I don't know if you guys can hear me. No one's commenting whether you can hear me or not. So I'm going to assume that the sound and everything's okay. So firstly, thanks so much for tuning in. If you are tuning in to watch my weekly live stream, so I actually started live streaming on LinkedIn last week Sunday, and it's something that I want to do on a weekly basis. For now, I'm going to do Sunday evenings, but moving forward, might want to see if I can do it on a weekday night as well, probably like midweek, so I can cover any and all of your job search and recruitment questions as well as specific topics that I want to cover. So as you can see today, what I'm going to cover is the top 5 mistakes based on my experience as a recruiter working in the staffing agency side of things that I've heard from organizations over the years in terms of the most major common and, in my opinion, avoidable mistakes that candidates are making at their interviews. So hopefully this information will be helpful for those of you tuning in. And in the meantime, just to give you a heads up, I have noticed on StreamYard there is a bit. StreamYard, by the way, is the platform I'm using for these live streams. There does appear to be a bit of a delay. So if you notice that I'm not responding to your question, because from last week live stream there were actually some questions I didn't see until after the stream ended. So my apologies for that. I'm pretty sure that StreamYard is working on fixing that. But any questions you want me to cover from a job search, interviews, recruitment standpoint, feel free to put it in the comments. And I know some of you might not want to make it publicly known that you might be on the market for work. So feel free to send me a private message as well. I do have my laptop open here to the side. Where I'll be monitoring my private messages as well. So if you have a question, you don't want it to be public, you want to send me a private message, feel free to do so. Just send me a private message. I'll do my best to get around to your question. And other than that, I hope that this session is informative for those of you tuning in. So how I'm going to structure it, first I'm going to talk real quick about today's topic. Again, as I mentioned, most common mistakes candidates are making at their interviews based on feedback I received from organizations as a recruiter. And next, we're going to get right into the Q&A part. You can ask me questions specifically in relation to today's topic, or it could be anything job search, interview, recruitment related, anything you have in mind that's kind of you have a whole bunch of question marks around. So feel free to ask me that. Again, feel free to type in the comments any questions you have, or feel free to send me a private message. But just in case if you're not able to hear me or the audio is not good, just let me know. Give me a heads up. I did purchase a new mic, so hopefully it's good quality audio here. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get right into the topic. So, top 5 mistakes, and again, this is based on feedback from organizations that I have recruited on who have been my clients, and these organizations ranging again from startups all the way to large size multinational organizations. So one of the great things working on the staffing agency side of things is you get to notice a lot of patterns based on feedback you get not only from candidates and job seekers but also from clients and organizations, and that allows me to kind of see kind of at a large broad scale the most common patterns and mistakes and stuff like that. So number one mistake that I've heard from organizations that a lot of candidates make during their interview process, in terms of attending the interviews, number one is not researching the organization. I know that might seem pretty obvious, But look, it's a common mistake whereby when you're preparing for the interview, you're so focused on yourself, right? You're thinking, okay, how am I going to pitch myself? How am I going to present myself? How am I going to show them the value I bring to the table? And you're going over your resume, you're going over your projects, and before you know it, you completely forget that you missed out on researching the organization that you're going to meet. And you know what's going to happen is at the interview, they're going to be like, hey, so what do you know about us, or what do you know about our organization? What interests you about our this particular opportunity at our company? And such a simple question, right? And I'm sure some of you watching this have experienced this, where you're like, oh my god, right? I mean, shame on myself, right? That I didn't even prepare that, or even research that information. So make sure you do this, folks. Like, it's a very simple thing, and at this point, and this is something I advise to candidates I represent. You do not have to be an expert about the organization. You do not need to go into too much detail, like going to the right into the nitty gritty about what they do and all that stuff. But at least at a very high level, at an abstract level, you need to know who the organization is, right? Who they are, what they do, what are their products, what are their solutions, any proprietary products or solutions they offer, what are their most outstanding products, solutions, services, award-winning product solutions, services, et cetera, et cetera. Also research and have an understanding about their operating principles, because that's always a good aspect for you to find, for you to know at the interview as well. And in addition to that, what you want to do is have a good understanding about any other additional stuff that the organization is involved with, namely, social, community related, philanthropic efforts. These are also great things for you to research and have an idea on them. Again, don't stress yourself with going into too much detail in terms of, you don't want to spend like 1 hour researching the company, unless it's in some very specific kind of a scenario. But have that understanding about what the organization, what they do, and all of that. And that way, this will allow you at the interview to also connect the opportunity with them and who they are as an organization, with what you're looking for from a career standpoint and what your career aspirations are. Number two mistake that candidates are making at their interviews is unfamiliarity with your own resume. This is a big one, because look, I always say, and if you've been following me for a while, I'm always saying, don't depend on your resume. Don't focus entirely on your resume. Your resume isn't everything. Now, that being said, that does not mean your resume is not important. I never say that your resume is not important. It is still an important document. And the reason for that is, keep in mind that the people you're meeting with, the interviewers, it could be someone on the HR team, could be a recruiter, could be a hiring manager or a technical manager. The only piece of information they have in front of you that represents you and who you are and what you bring to the table is your resume. So you can count on them probably referring to your resume at some point at the interview. And for the most part, what you want to do is focus on especially any recent projects. Number one, recent projects, and number two, most relevant projects in relation to what they're looking for in an ideal candidate, or whatever project they have going on. Those are the things they're going to be looking for. And you don't want to waste time at the interview trying to remember things and recall things. And we've all been there. I know I've been there, where I've been like, okay, I can't remember. Let me think, and that kind of thing. You don't want to waste time at the interview trying to do that. It needs to be practiced and reviewed upon, right? So when you're preparing for the interview, and I usually suggest if you're at a senior level at your career, I'd suggest, any project you've done in the past 5 years, I'd stretch that even out to 8 years, 5 to 8 years. Any major projects you've done, select one or two standout projects at your most recent positions. Now, the one factor that overrides that is relevant projects. If it's a relevant project that's directly in relation to what they're looking for this particular position you're interviewing for, you definitely want to refresh yourself on those as well. And again, you want to make sure you're not wasting time at the interview trying to remember things that you should know on the fly and off the top of your head, or at least that allows you to come across as fluid, right? And so that's that. Now, number three common mistake candidates make at their interviews: surface level responses. What do I mean by surface level? It means you're not. It means you're taking the whole, keep your responses to the point, straight and to the point thing to the extreme. Like, you're being too surface level. You're being too vague. You're being too abrupt in your responses. Now, that can come across as two things. Number one, it could come across as you not knowing your stuff. The person interviewing you might assume, this person looks like they don't know much about this topic, or they don't know what they're talking about. And it could also come across as a lack of preparation. It could also come across as a lack of interest in the position and the opportunity. So keep that in mind. Don't leave your responses at just surface level. You want to go into a bit more detail, which brings me into number 4. The number 4 common mistake candidates make is their responses being too long drawn out, too long-winded. You're going into a whole speech and a thesis, and it's like the other extreme, right? So this is where you got to strike the balance. You don't want to be too vague and too abrupt, like the previous point I was speaking about, but at the same time, you don't want to be too long-winded, too going on forever and ever, and going off on a tangent. Now, it's very normal at interviews, for especially if you have good rapport with the person you're speaking with, to go a little bit off topic, to veer a little bit off topic. Completely fine, by the way, but as the person being interviewed, as the person selling themselves for this opportunity, I want you to have more control over that, right? So if things do go off topic, or veer into kind of a zigzag in terms of what you're talking about, I need you to be aware of that, and then bring it back to the point and to the question that they were asking about, and stay on track and answer the question. So and most importantly, strike the right balance between not being too vague and too abrupt, and not being too long-winded either. You need to strike right at the middle, where you're being concise, straight to the point. And if you have any doubts about whether your response is too vague or too abrupt, you can always ask for clarification. You can always say, "Hey, look, did I answer your question, or would you like me to elaborate on that further?" Number 5. Now, this is a big one, very important one, and that is candidates interrupting a lot and frequently during the interview. Now, this is not this does not occur because candidates are rude or impolite. That's never the intention, as far as I know. Usually, the reason why this happens is that you're excited about what you're talking about. Maybe it's a major achievement you're speaking about, and they're asking the question, and you just can't wait, and you just want to get to responding. You have a great rapport with the person. You're assuming that they won't mind. But look, the more frequently this happens, the more you interrupt something, the more annoying it becomes. We've all been there, and I'm not even talking about work. I'm sure all of you have a friend or family member, and no matter how many conversations you've been with them, they keep cutting you off, keep interrupting you, and think about how that makes you feel, right? It's probably not their intention to offend you or upset you or anything like that. But keep in mind, at the interview, like, this is someone you just met, right? You can't expect them to understand or know that your intention is not to be impolite or rude. And what they're thinking about when you're interrupting them during the interview is not that, wow, this is a passionate person, they're so excited and this and that. What they're thinking is, man, I mean, when they how am I going to deal with this person when they start working with me? I'm going to be giving them instructions or telling them about this or that, and they're just going to keep interrupting me. So keep that in mind. You don't want to interrupt the people or the individuals at the interview. So my suggestion on that is wait until they finish asking the question. And 2 reasons for this. Obviously, the first one I mentioned just now. You don't want to interrupt them or come across as rude or impolite. Number 2 is the question could have multiple parts, folks. A lot of you are starting to answer the question, not realizing that there might be multiple parts to the question. And so you want to make sure at your end, you're waiting until they finish asking the question before you go ahead and respond. And also, third thing, number 3, bonus tip, right? It'll also allow you, if after asking the question you don't understand the question, and you verified there's no multiple parts to it, you can and it still doesn't make sense. Now it's perfectly fine for you to ask for clarification. You can say, look, I'm not sure I understand point XYZ regarding this question. Can you please elaborate on that, or whatever you need to do to understand the question? So hopefully that makes sense. And I mean, those are the top 5 tips, the top 5 common mistakes. So I'm going to quickly go over them again. Number 1, not researching the organization that you're interviewing at. Number 2, unfamiliar with your own resume. Refresh yourself on your own resume, folks. Very important. Your resume is not the most important, not the only and the most important thing. It's still up to you to sell yourself for the opportunity. But keep in mind, the resume is the one document the interviewer has in front of them to refer to. And you better be the expert on that document, right? Number 3, providing surface level responses at your interviews. You're being way too vague and abrupt and way too surface level at your interviews in terms of your responses. So keep that in mind. Number 4, your responses are too long-winded, too drawn out. You're going off into a tangent. You're going way off course, right? And so you need to bring that back around. Stay on point. Stay on topic. Fine to go a little bit off topic, of course, during the natural flow of a conversation, but remember to bring it back. Right? And number 5, consistently interrupting. This is something very important. Avoid interrupting the interviewer when they're asking you a question and it's mid question and all that. Be aware of that. Be conscious of that, and keep that in mind. And yeah, I mean, those are the top 5 tips, and I hope that was helpful for you. And if you're making these mistakes, don't feel bad. Okay, the important thing you need to take away from this is, okay, at least now I'm aware of this and I can fix it. So and just to be real with you, it probably, if you have been making these mistakes, it probably might have costed you moving along in the interview process, or maybe even getting a job offer. In extreme cases, of course, depends on how often you're making these mistakes at the interview. But that being said, moving forward, if you can fix these and adjust these, it'll help you moving forward in your interview process. So look, that's today's topic for today. Now, what I'd like to do now is open the floor for any job search, interview, or recruitment related questions. So any questions you have, I did notice no one's really commented yet. So let me check my inbox right now and check if I have any private messages with any specific questions, which I can respond to. If not, we'll cover, we'll wrap it up for the evening, and I'll connect with you next week. So I got a question in my private message, and the question is, what are the points I should research about the organization? Okay, so regarding what points you should research, like I mentioned before, what you want to do is you don't want to go into too much detail. You don't need to be an expert about the company or the organization at this point. But at a very high level, you should have an understanding about what the organization's primary and major products, solutions, services are, what they do, how long have they been in the industry, how long have they been in the sector, any standout points about the company, any awards and recognition the organization has received. And another thing is, depending on the role that you're applying for, maybe it's a very specific project which directly is involved with a certain product line or solution or services line at the company. You might want to put a little bit more research into that part of the organization. So just keep that in mind, that those might be some of the aspects you want to research regarding the organization. But again, as mentioned, don't want you to spend like an hour or 2 hours researching the company or the organization. They're not expecting that. But what you should do definitely is have a high level understanding about the company, the organization, the products, the solutions, the services they offer, and if needed, any other specific information which might be notable for the position that you're interviewing for. So hopefully that helps you. Thanks so much for your question. I got another question here in private message, and let me see here. What are good general questions to ask the interviewer in an interview? Okay, so that's a great question. So look, there's so many questions you can ask the interviewer, but if I could recommend my top question, most important question to ask at an interview is, and by the way, this is a question you don't want to wait until the end to ask, but basically the question is, why are you looking to hire for this position at this time? Like, why, the reason why you want to ask this question is to get an understanding about what the sense of urgency is, why they're looking to hire for the position at this time. And this will kind of open up the discussion for you to uncover what problem the organization is experiencing at their end that requires them to find someone for this position. And it'll get a conversation going about what their actual and real needs are. And in fact, just on the staffing agency side of things, as a recruiter on the staffing agency side, this is a key question that I always cover with any clients I'm representing or any roles that I'm recruiting on, because this allows me to get an understanding about why are they looking to hire for this position? What are the key components? It's a very good question for opening up the discussion. Now, that being said, asking this question right at the end of the interview might not make sense. And the other thing is, if you're being represented by an agency, now I can't speak on behalf of other agencies, but I know when I'm representing a candidate for a position, this is key information I always share with the candidates so that they know that information in advance. But let's say you're applying for a job directly. You apply for a job directly. You're going in for the interview, and and you don't have that that added bonus of having someone who's able to share with you that inside information. You need to ask this question yourself, and you might not be able to ask it up front. When you apply, obviously at the application stage, but at the interview, during the normal flow of conversation, as early on in the conversation as possible, you need to pose this question. And it could be right after they ask you their initial question, like, tell me about yourself and all of that. you can always ask. I have taken the time to review the job description and research your company and your organization. But before we go any further, I just want to find out why, what are you looking for in an ideal candidate at this point, and why are you looking to hire for this position at this time? And I kind of threw in another great question to ask as well, by the way, which is, what are you looking for in an ideal candidate for this particular position? So anyway, I hope those two questions provide some good insight as to some good questions to ask, because again, it opens up the floor for you to get some real crucial, important, and critical data and information that'll help you understand, okay, what parts of your background you wanna sell or highlight to the interviewer and the people that you're meeting with. So again, hope that answers your question. So those are two good questions to ask. Any other questions? Like, I don't see any other particular questions being posed on the live stream. But so what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap this up shortly. So thanks to everybody that did join the live stream. I appreciate you joining in. I will try to do these on a weekly basis. And if you have any specific or particular questions you want me to cover, certainly feel free to send me a private message on next time on the live stream for next week. And again, send me any private messages with any questions you have, and I'll be sure to cover it on the live stream. If I'm not able to get around to your question, keep tuning in on a week. I will be doing these on a weekly basis, and I'll definitely and certainly get around to your question, and hope to add more clarity and more information about what to expect at your interviews, and how I can help on a from a recruitment perspective, and also eventually cover any active positions that I'm working on as well. So again, thanks so much for all of you for joining in. I appreciate you joining in. If I missed your question, I do not see any other questions written here. So well, actually, I think I got a private message just now. So let me just quickly check on that, and just make sure I didn't miss anyone's questions. Let's see here. Yeah, so the same person asked me the question was, they said, "Thanks, Dean. I never thought to ask that." And the fact that you can ask questions throughout the interview is a good point. Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing I want everyone to keep in mind is the interview does not simply have to be the interviewer asking you a question and then you answering it, and it going that it's very robotic, right? Now the exception is if it's a highly structured interview whereby you've been given an agenda, and this is usually in the public sector, like government positions. They have highly structured interviews with a very specific agenda, where the Q&A part is always specified as a certain point in the interview. So you might not be able to have it like a conversation, but for the most, and that is the exception, but for the most part, the best interviews always have the back and forth flow of a conversation. So it doesn't have to be you just sitting there and responding to the question or answering the question that they ask, and then just waiting for them to ask another question. You can bounce back with another question of yourself, like based on the topic you're discussing. Maybe they're asking you about XYZ, and you thought about something you want to mention about XYZ, and you can get back at them with a question of your own. So you don't necessarily have to wait until the end. You just need to make sure. And the best time to ask a question is when you think of the question, right? Because that's probably the most relevant time to ask, because it's based off a conversation or a topic you're currently discussing. So keep that in mind. And yeah, absolutely, great point. You don't have to wait until the end. Again, keep in mind the best interviews have the back and forth flow of an actual conversation. Like, those are usually the best interviews, and that's how you know when things are going pretty well. Okay, other questions. Let me see if we have any other questions here. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Let me see here. Let me just check. I think I got another message here. No, I just got a thank you. So yeah, so it looks like that's about it for tonight, folks. So thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate you joining in. I will be doing these weekly. And if you have any feedback, any particular topics you want me to cover, send me a message. I'll be sure to cover that when I'm doing these weekly live streams. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. And again, any questions you have, any topics you want me to cover, feel free to let me know. And I hope everybody has a great week ahead. We're in the last few days of December, and wishing everyone a great and prosperous and happy 2020. We're starting a new decade, and here's hoping and wishing that everybody makes it the best decade yet to come. So thanks so much, and have a good night.